And welcome to our webinar about the educational opportunities in low Earth orbit. So without further ado, I'd like to show the agenda. So we're just kicking this off now. We're going to hear about the IceCube's capabilities and case studies. Hilda Stenuit, who is the Space Application Services Business Development Manager for IceCubes, will be speaking. We also have Tanya Canigan, who's the Senior Science Advisor for Space Commerce Matters. And we're really happy to have Anna Marie and Jessica Gray from the IceCubes US team here with us today.
Well, and a pity you don't see me, but at least you get now a picture. So below on your screen, and we already introduced Jessica and Anne-Marie that are also here, and thank you, ladies. And they're also here to support any questions you may have at the end of that. And as Cindy already said, please dump your questions in the chat so that we can have a good Q&A session at the end. Next slide, thank you. So who are we with IceCubes? Next slide. So we provide an end-to-end service to fly your research, your technology, your educational projects to the International Space Station. We do that here where I am in Europe, but we also do that in the US where Jessica and Anna are. They are based in Houston, and we are an implementation partner to the ISS National Lab. We provide regular access to space and to our facility on board the space station, and also the engineering support that comes with that. And our facility allows for a unique real-time interaction capability, and I'll say a bit more later on that. Next slide, please. So we fly these different type of modules, or cubes as we refer to them, but honestly, they don't need to be cubes. They can also be other form factors. And these modules or cubes, they can be installed both inside our facility, as you can see on the left, really in a plug and play way, and that allows them to get power and data, and that allows to interact with them as you want to. That's one possibility. Another possibility you see on the right image, that is that we actually also have a connector that allows to have one of these cubes or modules on the front of our facility. That means actually in the environment where the crew is. And so they can also interact with that cube that is on the front in the aisle of the module where our facility is. That's a second option. And that allows for to accommodate things that have strange shapes, or where you want to explicitly have interaction with the crew, for example. And the third possibility is very interesting as well, is that you can think of cubes or modules that connect to our facility through the wireless. And this allows to also test certain technologies. For example, you can think of navigation, formation flying, or to test certain subsystems for docking or for refueling that can be tested on the space station as a test bed in this case, and that can connect through the wireless to do their commanding or monitoring. Next slide. So I mentioned that we have this unique real-time interaction capability. So this is provided so that you can actually interact from any location where you have internet. So we set things up that you can connect through a VPN tunnel directly to your module or cube in space. And so you can actually send commands from your house, from your lab, from your university, and get real-time data back. And so we have high-speed data up and down link. And that really allows to interact real-time with your cube or module as you like to. Obviously, your cube is provided with power and data. And I mentioned that there's a wide range of form factor flexibility, so they can have different forms, but also very different volumes that can be accommodated in the ways I mentioned before. And also the duration that you want to stay on board can be fully determined by you. So if you're after, for example, an educational project that relates to radiation, you will probably want to stay longer. If you're after science that is more biological, for example, you may want a shorter mission duration. On the bottom, and you will get access to these slides and even to the PowerPoint version. There is the link to our interface requirements document, which where you can find more technical details on the different aspects of power, data, and so on. Next slide. So that's a general overview of what we do with our IceCube service. Now let's dig into what are the educational capabilities and which type of activities we have been doing and can support also in the future. And I grouped these in four categories, let's say, or options. A first one relates to challenges or competitions for educational purposes. And these can be organized for different levels, can be for primary school, can be for secondary, high school, can be for university level, and can be around different areas. For example, we have been doing a challenge, and I'll say a bit more around AI or around coding for primary school kids. Or global sustainability, so more how can space be used for sustainability topics. And we can be involved in those processes of the challenges and competitions in different forms and shapes. So we can be part of the selection process, we can be part of the feasibility assessment, or we can mentor teams, set up workshops, as we are doing also right now for some that will be flying next year through some competitions as well. That's the first group of activities around challenges or competition. A second group is where you can use or fly certain cubes for your science or for your technologies. And the first group that I'll dig a bit deeper just after the high level description is that you can actually think to focus on the science for an educational project and use some of the cubes that are actually ready off the shelf and that you could think to actually be using for your science. Or you can say, well, I'm interested actually from an educational standpoint to focus on space engineering. Then you can also choose to develop your own cube and focus really on the engineering and the development of that cube and then fly it to space. Or you can also choose to focus on technology and use the platform to demonstrate and validate your technology. And I'll dig a bit deeper on those as well. A third group is on the bottom left, is related to the media set that we have on board, which allows for interactive events with the crew, both real-time interactive or recorded events. And I'll say a bit more on how you could be using that, for example, for lessons from space, but also for interactive art projects, for example. And the fourth group of activities is on the bottom right. There we provide through an organization called Metaspace, we provide courses, can be executive courses, can be courses in the form of Space Academy that touch on very different topics related to space. And we're also setting up a network of Space Innovation Lab. And that's also a possibility that these Space Innovation Lab can actually be installed at your university or your educational organization. So let's dig a bit deeper. And indeed, let's start with the one that is now highlighted in green, to use cubes off the shelf, as we say, that are existing and have maybe flown before. For most of them, I'll say a bit more on that. And let's start with the first one. So you can go on the next slide. So this is actually a cube that was originally thought of specifically for educational projects. It's based on a number of tubes, standard tubes or cuvettes. In the first configuration, there were 6 tubes that can be filled with very, very different science topics, let's say. Can be about fluids, can be about particles, about bacteria. It can have cells, it can have even plants or fungi. And so you can actually monitor during the exposure period on board the space station. you can monitor what is going on in your science samples through multiple cameras, and you can have lighting that allows to see these samples properly. You can stimulate these samples with light or heat. And again, you can have real-time commanding and monitoring of that cube by yourself, or you can also connect it to our AI box, our artificial intelligence capability that is on board to play around with AI on the data or the images that come from this particular cube. We are enhancing this science cube for a mission on the next SpaceX vehicle in such a way that it can accommodate 12 tubes and that it can provide for temperature control at 37 degrees. Because we will be flying cells and actually organoids in these tubes that can be monitored throughout the mission. So this cube has flown 3 times for genetic studies, actually, for a Maltese team. Next slide. So this is the first cube. A second one that can be of interest maybe for your educational project is a greenhouse. So that greenhouse has been flown previously for a project between the International Space University and NASA Ames to look at the growth of seedlings under microgravity conditions. And so it has a volume in which these seedlings can grow. It has a reservoir with water, with hormones, with growth medium. It has LEDs, so you can stimulate with different lights. And it has also a camera that allows to follow the growth of these seedlings, for example, in this greenhouse. So again, that's something that is available for people to use in case they say, okay, I'm interested to focus on the science, so I take something that is off the shelf like this greenhouse. Next one. The next one is our BioCube. So this is still under development, but we're moving steadily for a first mission early next year with this BioCube. This is being developed really for cell culture experiments. So it's for the initial mission, it will be based on a 6-well plate in which you can, in these different wells, you can have different samples. There will be temperature control for these samples, and you can do a regular medium refresh. You can have your samples fixed at the end. There's the possibility to test medical compounds, and there's some diagnostics that allow you to follow optically and also the pH in these different sample wells throughout that mission. So it's really set up for cell culture, biological science, if that could be of interest for your project, possibly on the space station. Next one. And the fourth one in this row of cubes that are ready on the shelf for you to use is Kirara. So Kirara allows for protein crystallization. So this is set up through a partnership with a Japanese company called GEMS. And they have designed this incubator that we have now flown for 5 Kirara missions, and that allows for protein crystallization. And it comes with an educational program that covers lectures, so more theory on crystallization processes and techniques and space missions, but also with a protein crystallization kit that can be distributed to schools. And that allows for students and kids to test the best conditions on the ground before they actually do their mission in space. And then, of course, the opportunity to participate in a real space mission. And on the next slide, you see one example in that sense that we flew in last December. So in Kirara 5, where there was a group or a program for Taiwan middle to high school students, and they have done a series of events over a period of 6 months with lectures and with testing on the ground of samples that they then also flew to space in the mission in December. So it's a fourth area that might be of interest for educational purposes, and that is ready to use, and you can choose to either have the whole Kirara cube for yourself, or you can also go on the basis of a number of tubes. So in total, there's 96 tubes that can go in one cube of one mission of Kirara. Next slide. So that covers that first group of cubes that are available for you to use off the shelf, let's say. That second group of educational activities related to challenges and competitions, I want to say a bit more on now. So if you can go to the next slide. So it's the one that was on the left top here. Challenges and competitions and how we can support. And let me show you some examples of some of these activities we have done and supported so far. The first one relates to our artificial intelligence box, AI box, that is actually hosted permanently inside our facility and can be offered to users on loan. So you can have access to upload and run your AI that you either train on the ground or you train your AI models directly on board. And so you can again interact with that AI box real time, and you can link it to other cubes, some of the ones that I mentioned, or one that you want to bring on board, or to the media set. And so we can use it for very different cases like in situ analysis or edge computing, image classification, object detection, and so on. And if you go to the next slide, then there is one specific challenge that we have been doing that was set up in Southeast Asia with a number of partners, specifically on how to use AI in space. And in fact, the winner of that challenge came up with an AI that allows to predict single event offsets, which is very much of interest for a lot of the agencies or entities that are doing activities on board in space. Also part of the AI box is a sensor suite, so a suite of very different sensors, and they're all listed there. I will not go through them, but if they are of interest for you to either get the data from these sensors or to apply AI on these sensors, on the data coming from these sensors, that's also there for you to use. And it also includes this Advacam Minipix sensor that allows for radiation and low power radiation camera, which is also very interesting to use. Next slide. So that challenge of the AI was at the level of university or high school students. We also did or supported one challenge that was related to coding, but then for primary school kids, they used this mini Calliope that you see on the right. This is a mini computer, a bit like the Raspberry Pi, but meant really for primary school kids for easy programming and STEAM or STEM activities. So it's really adaptable for all ages. It has a number of LEDs, a speaker, some sensors, microphone, and so on. And so kids can play around thinking how they can actually use this mini computer and do some coding with it. And if you go to the next slide, you see the activities that the winning team actually came up with. So they integrated this mini computer and this mini Calliope in a bowl that they made themselves. And so they asked the crew member, in this case, Samantha Cristoforetti, to actually test how different it is to throw and bounce a ball on the target that you see at the back behind Samantha, and compare it with the bouncing and the throwing that they would be doing on Earth. And you can actually, the link is there of the YouTube video, and you can see how much fun Samantha Cristoforetti had with this project. And so this was kids from 10, 11 years old. So I was really impressed with the ideas they came up with. So it's another educational challenge now for primary school kids related to coding. And so, yeah, I mentioned verbally, there's no slide, but we also did one then related to sustainability. And the challenge was targeting university students and startups. to trigger them on coming up with ideas on how the space environment could be used for sustainability related topics and areas. And then you can indeed go ahead, thanks Cindy, for media set. So as I mentioned, and you can jump to 2 slides further, we have this media set on board that you see here. So it's based on a GoPro camera. And so it can be used for a very different type of either interactive events with the crew or recorded events. And these both the interactive or the recorded events can actually be streamed on YouTube, on Vimeo, whatever platform you like, through our media center in Brussels, and then back to wherever your VIP or your students are gathered, or on these video platforms. And so it allows for interaction with the crew. We're also bringing up a new media set that will have some additional capabilities that can then also be used in the context of, for example, science related to health monitoring and with the camera, and link it with the AI capability as well. So far, and you can jump to the next slide, we have been using that media set in the context of the Axiom missions. So we have been doing about 80 events so far. And so we cannot watch the video, but you will get access to it. And I invite you to look on the one that I integrated in the slide, but also on the links that are there below. So the Axiom crew members during Axiom 1, 2, and 3 were using it for events with the press, but also with VIP, and definitely also a lot that relate to STEM education and to interacting with kids on the ground as inspirational tool for them to light up their eyes while they are talking to the crew members on board, and they can show what they are doing on a daily basis in terms of science or other crew activities. So it's there to be used. And as I mentioned earlier, it's also nice to think in the sense of using these media set for lessons from space, or also from maybe interactive art projects, for which we have also been doing some in the past, but also we think the media set is actually very nice to think in that sense for the A in the STEAM activities. Next slide. Then we come to the fourth group of activities, and you can go to the next. So I mentioned that we set up this organization called Metaspace. You can jump to the next slide, Cindy. And with that organization, we do courses, executive courses, Space Academy courses on different topics. And we are also setting up, and again, you can jump to the next slide, a global network of space innovation labs. So what are these space innovation labs? This is infrastructure that we install on the ground in different universities or in companies or in other research institute entities that allow to connect to space. So it consists of engineering capabilities, but also a mission operations control center that allows to command from your location to whatever infrastructure or cubes or modules that are in space. And it also connects to metaverse, to AI capabilities. As of today, there's 10 of those space innovation labs initiated, and you see on the map where these are initiated. And we are steadily expanding that network. So if that's of interest for you to have some space innovation lab maybe installed at your entity that allows to connect and to the network and to space and to metaverse and immersive technology capability, then that would be definitely of interest to discuss further. And on the next slide, again, the video will not work now, but there are some examples of the Space Innovation Lab. So on the right, this is a Space Innovation Lab in the Oxford University in the UK that is focused. So each of these Space Innovation Lab can have their focus area. The one in Oxford is mainly oriented towards aging and also cartilage, joint aging, and the one on the left is related to is from Malta. They are more looking at genetic studies. They have been doing a number of missions on human skin microbiome and from diabetes patients. So samples from diabetes patients, and so they're focused on genetic studies in general. Next slide. And so from here, and maybe I'll stop it there because then you can get access to those slides and look at your ease. But in the remaining slides, there's an overview of the type of cubes we have been flying so far, and also some success stories with some of the links that you can read through at your ease. But I think we can open it for question and answers. Or first back to you, Cindy, for the fun.
No. Thank you so much, Hilda. Once again, incredible information here. We have been getting some questions during your talk, and some of them have been answered directly by Anna in the Q&A section of this webinar. But one of the questions I don't think that has been answered is what power range can the IceCubes facilities provide to each single unit, to each 1U?
Yeah, so in total, we can draw from the facility that we are installed in, we can draw 500 kilowatts, and that is to be spread over the complement of different modules or cubes that are at one single time in the facility. So typically, you can think of 30, 40 kilowatts per unit, let's say, per interface connector.
Right. And there were a number of other questions, which I do think have been answered in the chat. If not, please, I guess we have one question, and I think it might have been answered by Anna, but about how many missions has IceCubes flown to the ISS?
About 30 now. Yeah, and many different types. And these are in the slides that come actually after where you are now. So you can just maybe show the next two slides. But we've done up to now around 30 missions.
Great. And so as we distribute this document, they'll be able to go through and see the types of projects that you've been doing. Correct? Yes. Okay. All right. All right. Well, thank you. And we will have additional time for question and answer at the end. But for now, what I'd like to do is introduce Tanya again. And we are going to share with you some more information, because when we typically talk about doing projects in space, whether they be STEM education or traditional project work, one of the biggest questions we always get is, what about the funding? And so what we've been doing from a Space Commerce Matters perspective is looking at broadly where are funding opportunities, either through government agencies or other types of grants. And then what we tend to do is look at the matchup between those funding opportunities and the facility, like we've been talking about today, the IceCubes facilities and services, and you as the PI, and sort of putting those ingredients together so that we can look at what are some of these successful funding opportunities. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Tanya, and over to you, Tanya.
Thank you, Cindy. So I'm going to provide an overview of U.S. funding opportunities relevant to STEM projects aboard the International Space Station. I'll try to keep it pretty brief because I know there are additional questions and other things to discuss after my slides. So first, of course, NASA is not the only source of funding. There are other agencies, the defense agencies, the Department of Energy, and the National Institute of Standards and Technologies have all released funding announcements for space, R&D, or STEM at some point or another. In this next slides, I'm going to just really focus on space, workforce, and education programs and funding calls. But we plan to have other webinars in the future discussing other areas. And you can always reach out to us if you have a really immediate interest in some other, or a particular type of research involving ice cubes, especially involving ice cubes in the ISS. We're happy to help. But if you go on to the next slide, Cindy. This is an overview of the open funding opportunities that we've identified. And you'll see that the first two opportunities, the deadline is in only a few weeks from now. But if you do not happen to have a proposal ready, or if you don't have access to an emergency grant response team, please do be reassured that these programs are reoccurring ones, and we do expect that they will be another application deadline approximately 1 year from now in 2025. So in that sense, you can think about being very early for the 2025 deadline. But I will tell you just a little bit about those first two programs. The one at the top is the Department of Defense has a STEM funding program, and it's administered by the Air Force Office of Scientific Research. And the priorities for this program are cultivating a diverse world-class STEM workforce relevant to the Air Force and also to the Space Force. The next opportunity is the EPSCoR International Space Station Flight Opportunity. And this program provides access to the International Space Station, so that covers really the launch costs for projects that are already in a late stage of development from states that have been designated as EPSCoR states. And those are states that are historically underrepresented in aerospace research. But the reason I'm including this program in the list, even though it's fairly focused R&D, is that it's partly sponsored by the NASA STEM office, and it does emphasize providing workforce development and training opportunities. So we're going to make all these slides available after this webinar to the attendees, and there are links you can click on in the program names to go to directly to the funding announcements or to what other information is available and get the details.
And Tanya, as you said right before that, additionally, if there's any questions on finding funding opportunities, if you don't see these as relevant for what you're looking for, that is something Space Commerce Matters can help you with. So please reach out to us.
Thank you. So for the next two opportunities in this table, I've prepared separate summary slides that have more details. So the ISS National Lab, there is a funding announcement that's been recently released. And this one is specifically for leveraging the International Space Station for education and workforce development. The concept paper is due in about a month from now, on April 24th, and full proposals are due on June 1st, but you have to be invited to apply to submit for the full proposal. The total funding for this program is $600,000 that is going to be distributed between 4 and 5 awards. The eligible institutions include higher education, non-academic institutions, and both for-profit and non-profit educational organizations. So it's a very broad call. And something that's really important about this particular year's funding call is that the emphasis is on workforce development. There was a webinar that was presented by the CASIS about maybe a week ago. And I provided a link under this is the opportunity webpage where you can see a recording of that webinar, which gets into more detail. And was about a Q&A session that was also recorded. So if you're interested in this opportunity, I encourage you to watch that video. Please, of course, reach out to Space Commerce Matters and to Ice Cubes for if you have any thoughts and questions and interest in applying. The next slide also contains another open program. And this is quite interesting. So this is from the National Science Foundation. and they have a supplemental funding program for space, and it's to, it's to really provide extra funding for current NSF awardees that have projects that have some to help them really promote both STEM and space ecosystems together, with the end goal of improving the space workforce. And these awards are up to 20% of the underlying NSF award. The announcement was made through a Dear Colleagues letter. I've provided a link to it, and it doesn't have a particular closing deadline. So then here as well, so in addition to those opportunities that are already open, we anticipate that several more programs will be released in this coming year. The first one is for U.S. universities, the Space Research Institute program. There's a program for nonprofit museums and planetariums, libraries, other youth-serving organizations that will be released in June. And finally, a program for minority university research and education projects. And that will be released probably in November. And the maximum awards, these are all multi-year programs, and the maximum award numbers I've presented there are for the total funding over the project. At least I believe they're all, at least, I think 2 or typically 1 to 3 years. But if you click on those links, you can see the details.
Tanya, before you continue on, we have a question. Do the NSF sub-awardees qualify for the Dear Colleague funding?
Oh, interesting. I do not know, to be honest, but happy to help you find that information. We'll look into it. It's a great question.
Yep. Okay, thanks. I'll go keep going.
I think I have just 1 or 2 more quick slides, and then we can open up the discussion. So yeah, really quickly, these are links to, there's some funding for undergraduate space related research. These are different, this is different from fellowships and scholarships. But again, please check out these links. Some of these programs are through the space grant programs. Each space grant program is specific to each state. So if you click on the link on the top left, you'll get a list of states. You find your state, see what kinds of educational programs are offered through the space grant program. And some of those states, you will have specific funding programs for undergraduate research.
And we actually have representatives from the space grant program here. So
fantastic!
So I'm glad we brought that up. Okay,
good. That's exciting.
All right, and I'm trying to.
And then just the last slide is just some links again that I thought people who are attending this call should be interested in. I think the thing that's most important, to know, the most valuable thing to know is that the International Space Station and NASA both maintain separate sites for funding announcements. So there are the ISS National Lab solicitations are found at the link on the top left. NASA has a funding search site for a separate set of programs that they lead as well. So you should really search both sites if you're looking for funding for space-related activities. There's also links here for educational programs that are already sort of set up, and that includes things like fellowship programs. There's programs for, I know for additional training for professors and and teachers and educators as well. Lots of really amazing opportunities.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And I think we are now at the discussion question and answer point. And one of the things we'd like to hear from you is, do you have any additional questions? I think we've been answering the majority of them in the chat. If not, please let us know that if any of those need more clarity. And then also, are there project concepts that you are working on that really resonated with the information that both Hilda and Tanya provided today? Or are you working in other areas that we haven't touched on and wondering how they could relate to space-based activity. So any or all of the above would be welcome at this point in terms of question and answer. And again, just making sure that we have answered all of the questions that have been coming through in the chat. And are there other questions? I believe that you will be able to raise your hand in case you want to talk, and then we can unmute you as well. And we just got another question about what is the max, which award are we talking about? We got a question, is the max award, what is the max award, a max award per award? So I don't know if that's related to one of the funding opportunities that Tanya just went through, or are we, what are we asking about there in terms of the max? I don't know, Paolo, if you want to raise your hand. Yes,
can you
you've
hear
been
me?
asking such great questions.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so Tanya was sharing that table, and on the column of the award amount, I was wondering, some of them were 15 million. Yeah, well, the previous one. Yeah, so 15 million, is that for one award or for 3, 5, 4? How do they split that?
Oh, yeah. No, those are the maximum awards.
Per award.
And and those awards are multi-year, so that's like total. So they might be $5 million a year for 3 years, I believe. I'd have to confirm that, but I believe it's something like that. So these are large awards. They're for, I think they're to form, pretty significant programs that can, create infrastructure and, really, really amazing results.
Yeah, no, I know for Europe and teams, they split those. So they might be like, they do up to 100 each and they select 8, something like that. And then on this,
Okay.
on the next table, the space grant. The nice thing about a space grant, every state has a space grant office. And we like to think that we are NASA in the state, especially if the state doesn't have a field center. Yeah. And the awards are pretty flexible overall. I can only speak for New Mexico, but you have to engage with their office, find who your office is at your particular state, and start that discussion, because this seems to be a doable project, particularly if space application services work with those interested in flying payloads. That's the hardest part, getting payloads in space. Universities, not too many do it. The usual suspects do it. Purdue, the big gorilla universities do it, but most of the people and students to democratize science, they don't get to do it. They build it and then sits on a shelf and unfortunately doesn't see space. But all right, thank you.
Well, hopefully that will change very soon, as more and more amazing facilities like what Hilda described today with the IceCubes offering, and there's others coming online as well, and hopefully we are going to see that broad-based uptake and usage in space, especially around these educational programs. All right, I think. Oh, I was going to turn it over to Hilda, and Hilda, I think we have. I'd love for you to say something, and also to address, we did get a few questions about, is IceCubes an American company, and sort of what is your role in that regard?
Yeah, thank you. And I wanted to add one thing on the great questions that Paolo and the comments that Paolo was making. I think what for us has been allowing also for some new educational entities to actually fly to space is that we do allow for people to contribute, for example, at one tube basis, or when I was talking about that science cube, I mean, your school or your university could actually define the content of that one tube, or could fly one or a couple of tubes in this protein crystallization incubator, which makes it really accessible also from a financial standpoint to really fly student projects to space. And on your other question, Cindy, and I think Anna also mentioned it, and she can comment further, or Jessica can. So Anna and Jessica are based in Houston, and that company is called Aerospace Applications North America. And so that's a US-based entity or company. I am based out of Europe with Space Application Services, and we run the IceCube service through both of the entities in the US and Europe. So for the US entities, it's obviously obvious to collaborate with Aerospace Applications North America, and that's why Anna has been doing such a great job in answering all of the questions in the Q&A because they're there to support from their side.
Great. Well, thank you, Hilda. And I think we're out of time, and we've sort of exhausted the questions. We really appreciate everybody attending today. And as Hilda mentioned, these slides will be available afterwards in a format that you'll be able to see the videos and click the links, the live links. And again, we would love to hear from you on anything that sparked your interest in terms of what's capable, what's possible in space related to STEM education, as well as with these funding opportunities that might be relevant to you. So thank you to everybody, and have a great rest of your day.